Hello everyone. Welcome to my workshop, which I've loosely titled as Getting Started with Ideas and Movement. Firstly, I'm going to have a bit of a talk about myself and the work I make, and then I'll share some tips and strategies I found particularly useful for starting out devising or making a piece of theatre. And finally, we'll have a look at generating some material using movement, which is a tool I found really useful when you're stuck after sitting down and writing for a few hours. Just having a bit of a move around, maybe a little boogie, gives you a chance to refresh and reset, and sometimes offers you some really great ideas for how you can get your work to the next stage and finding material that you can use to make that happen. So when people ask me what I do, I say that I'm an actor or a theatre maker, which is a pretty loose and broad term. Some days I write, I create, I devise, I perform, I direct, I produce even. I have a background in dance and classical ballet, which I started when I was 3 years old, and I went to WAAPA and did a Bachelor of Performing Arts, majoring in performance making. I think while I was doing that course, I discovered my passion for the intersections between disciplines and the freedom of existing beyond the traditional labels of the theatre. I think growing up in a ballet world where I was forced to fit the mould of being a ballerina every day meant that I find so much joy and freedom from being able to exist beyond labels and make the work that you really want to make. And I find there are so many unique and awesome opportunities to connect and collaborate with people across different disciplines, and you never really know what you're going to make, but it's always different and exciting. I love that you can use theatre to share stories and connect with each other and listen and learn and feel from a point of view that you might never have ever thought about before. I have a strong passion for mental health advocacy, which comes from my lived experience of having borderline personality disorder. In fact, that's what our show Borderline, coming to the Blue Room in 2021, is all about. So be sure to keep an eye out for that one. From my training and experience of devising theatre, I'm very used to sitting in a rehearsal room collaborating with a bunch of other devisers to bring a show to life. Two practitioners' work that I found particularly useful are Anne Bogart's Viewpoints book, which she wrote with Tina Landau, and Frantic Assembly's The Frantic Assembly book of devising theatre. And Frantic Assembly are a physical theatre company in the UK. They both have a bunch of different exercises and ideas for making and devising work, particularly focused on movement and physical theatre. And again, they are very tailored to collaborating with a group in a rehearsal room. However, sometimes when you're just starting out or you're working on a solo piece or you find yourself in the middle of a global pandemic, these are not really an option for you. So I'm using this workshop to explore some ways that you can start out making theatre when you're stuck at home or in your bedroom, or in my case, our lounge/craft room area. First of all, I think it's really important to note that there are a million different ways to start out a project, and there's definitely no right or wrong. It's about what inspires and connects with you. It might be a question, an image, a scene, a line, a subject, a character, a purpose or a meaning or a message, or even a really specific way a tree branch moves in the wind that one time that really inspired you to think about something in an entirely new way. Borderline actually started out with an idea of an image that I've used since I was about 15, which is of the sky being covered in black plastic, with only pinpricks of light shining through. And some days those pinpricks are the size of golf balls or apples or footballs. And on those days, it's easier to believe in the sky and hope and tomorrow. And that's a metaphor that I'd use to describe how I was feeling inside a lot when I didn't have the other words that I could use to describe it. But when I was thinking back on that image, I could see a lot of theatrical potential from that. And that's where the first idea of turning my story into a theatre piece came from. When I'm starting out a project, I often find myself in one of two positions, or sometimes somewhere in the middle. Either I have tons of ideas and thoughts, but no actual clue of how to narrow them down or focus them at all, or my mind is totally blank and I'll sit for hours at the computer and get so frustrated and cross with myself for not even being able to have one single idea. Some things I've found useful for both those situations. If you've got that empty head feeling, start filling it with stuff that's already out there. Rewatch or reread some of your favourite shows or plays or any kind of work that you connect with. Think about what it is that you connect with and why you connect with it, and what are the ways that the artists you admire are making and creating work. For Borderline, I was really inspired by Georgina Karaman's Interrupting a Crisis, which was at the Blue Room Theatre in 2017. She used songwriting and music to convey her personal experience of struggling with anxiety, and watching that, I was so inspired to think that maybe it would be possible for me one day to stand up on a stage and talk about my lived experience. If you're on the other side with heaps of ideas buzzing around in your brain, then I would suggest writing them all down. Using palm cards is a great way to do this. Just jot down an image or an idea or a line or whatever it is that's come to your brain. Just put them all down and keep them somewhere that you can come back to when you need. Also, sometimes if you have an idea right as you're falling asleep, I often find that I can't be bothered to turn on the light, so I'll just record myself talking about it on my phone and re-listen to it and write something down the next morning. Whatever strategy works for you, documenting all your ideas is a really important part of the creative process, as it means you don't have to store everything in your head, and you'll be surprised at how many times, like 3 weeks later on, when you've been working on the project and you're searching for that final element that's going to bring your whole piece together, you'll end up coming back and rediscovering an idea that you had back at the very beginning that ends up fitting perfectly in with what you were doing. So now we're going to have a look at Anne Bogart's chapter 12 from her Viewpoints book, where she talks about some of the basic building blocks for devising work. So she outlines 3 basic building blocks as a question, an anchor, and a structure. She talks about the question being the theme or the driving force that motivates the entire project. An anchor is a person or event or something that the whole story is framed around. And finally, the structure is the skeleton upon which it all hangs. So it's basically what method you're using to convey your story. In the case of Borderline, I would say that the question and driving force was, how can we talk about mental health and borderline personality disorder in a way that's positive and hopeful without shying away from the really difficult reality? When I think about the anchor, it's my lived experience and my life stories as what I share. And finally, when I think about the structure, it's storytelling, songs, and puppetry, which are the different tools that we use to convey this story to our audience. So let's have a go playing around with these building blocks. So we can use them to think about a project or idea that we've already been working on. And we can see if we can think about framing it in terms of a question, an anchor, and a structure. Maybe 1 or 2 of these categories is really clear in your head, but the other one's not so much. So have a play around with different ideas and seeing if you can frame it that way. Alternatively, we can have a go starting from scratch. Think of a question that interests and engages you. What anchor could you use to talk about, and what structures? For example, the question could be, why is change so difficult to accept? The anchor might be a personal story that you have struggling to leave school, or a story that you create about a bird leaving a cage for the first time. Then think about the structure. How could you tell this story? Thinking about shows you've seen before, what was their structure? Was it physical theatre, or storytelling, or poetry? Or was it a combination of a few things that ended up working really well together? So if you want to pause this video now and put a timer on your phone for about 10 or 15 minutes, if it helps, you could draw up a table like I have a play around with these building blocks to see what ideas you can come up with and how you can connect and extend them to a framework that might help you start making a piece of theatre. How'd you go? Any inspiring ideas or thoughts or things that you could see going somewhere? If there was, that's awesome. I'm so excited to see where they go and what they might lead to. If not, that's totally fine as well. It may be that this approach takes a little bit more time to get used to and trying out, or it might be that it's not for you. Like I said, there's a million different ways to start, and this is just one idea. Another really important thing to remember is be prepared for it all to change. These first ideas are fabulous and full of potential, but along the process, you'll find that some of them help and others can sometimes get in the way of making a piece. Anne Bogart has a phrase that she uses, hold on tightly, let go lightly, which means follow all your ideas 100% to see where they take you, but always be prepared to discover along the way that actually that dance section that you've been working on for 3 weeks doesn't fit with the rest of the piece or convey what you think it's saying. That's one of the reasons it's so important to show people and get feedback along the process, as it's not until you have a fresh set of eyes looking at something that they can point out things that you didn't realise before because you were so invested and engaged in the piece. Okay, let's move on to the second exercise. This one's for generating material using movement, and it's something I love to do, particularly when I'm feeling a bit stuck or frustrated. It can be really good for sparking ideas for the structure or the anchor of a piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to find some space somewhere in your house, or I like to go in the back garden if no one's around. Get your phone or laptop out so that you can record yourself and have a dance to your favourite song. Don't think too much about what you're doing or what it looks like. Just find a song that you enjoy and let the enjoyment fill your body for the duration of the song. If dancing isn't your thing, you could also try going out with a camera and filming things moving, like trees or your dog running around, any material that interests you for about 2 to 3 minutes. I'll put a little video of myself having a boogie in now, but feel free to pause the video now and have a go yourself. When you're finished, watch back your dance, maybe with the sound off so you're just focusing on your movements. If you have the functions on your device, try slowing down different parts or speeding them up, or picking one section and repeating it over and over. Try and pick out 5 sections or movements from your video that you really like or you think look interesting. You can think of these 5 movements as your score. Have a play around with them. See if you can put them in a different sequence. Maybe have one a bit slowed down and then a couple really fast, or one that repeats 3 or 4 times. Once you've got your sequence, you could try recording it again, or alternatively, you can make a record of it in your notebook, whatever feels more natural. And there you go. You've just probably made about 30 seconds to a minute's worth of choreography in less than 10 minutes. Maybe something in those movements might fit somewhere with an idea you've been working on, or it might just be something that you can keep saved to look back on later when you're looking for inspiration. Or you could try this exercise again when you're looking for some way to incorporate physical theatre into your movement. I'd recommend picking a song that matches with whatever theme or feeling you're going for. You may never end up using that song, but by using it to inspire your movement, it might end up conveying something that you were trying to say. So, if you're having a character who's feeling really frustrated and overwhelmed and doesn't know how to express themselves, maybe having a boogie to a really angry or screamo song might mean that then you get some movements and ideas for ways that you can reflect this character's feeling with their body. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for being part of the workshop. I hope you've had some fun and you found something interesting. And if not in this one, maybe one of the next 4 workshops will inspire something in your theatre making. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the Zoom meeting. Bye!